All right, let's dive into Madrid today. We're going deeper than your typical tourist spots, really getting into the history and the culture. And our guide for this is, believe it or not, Madrid's Wikipedia page.
You can find some amazing stuff just on one Wikipedia page sometimes.
Absolutely. And the first thing that caught my eye, I gotta say, was Madrid's altitude. Do you know it's the highest capital in the whole EU?
Yeah, 667 meters above sea level. It's not just a fun fact either. It shapes the entire city, from the scorching summers to those winters that can get, well, surprisingly cold. You even get some heavy snowfall every now and then.
You don't really think of Spain and snow at the same time. I wonder how that impacts everything from their architecture to just like daily life.
It's a good point. Even things like how important outdoor spaces are, or the kind of crops that can grow there. It all goes back to that geography.
Okay, so let's talk about the name Madrid. It's got a bit of a mysterious origin story, right?
Definitely. There are a couple of theories that kind of go back and forth. One connects the name to the Arabic word Madshra, which means water channel.
Okay.
But then there's another theory pointing to the Latin matricum, meaning source of a stream. So the debate is really about whether Madrid was already there before the Moors or if they founded it completely.
And recent archaeology has thrown a wrench in the traditional thinking on that, hasn't it?
It has. People used to think Madrid had this long, long history, maybe even going back to before the Moors. But some excavations near the royal palace, they didn't find any housing from the 9th century, which is what they were expecting.
Interesting.
Instead, what they found were buildings from the 12th century.
So is Madrid younger than we thought?
Well, some experts are saying that, yeah, maybe urban development started later than we thought, mainly with the Christians. But of course, it started a whole new argument. Other folks are pointing to wells and silos, even a drainage system from way back in the Umayyad period. That supports the idea of earlier Moorish origins.
It's like a historical puzzle with missing pieces. But whatever the exact date, we know Madrid starts as this Moorish fortress back in the 9th century.
Right. And it was taken by the Kingdom of Castile in 1083 during the Reconquista. It's worth remembering that the Reconquista was this huge process. It took centuries for the Christian kingdoms to take back the Iberian Peninsula from the Moors. It really shaped Spain as we know it today.
I didn't realize it went on for so long. I'm learning so much already. And you can actually still see a part of the original Moorish wall.
Really?
Yeah, it's right by the cathedral. It's like this physical connection to that time period.
Wow. To think about everything that's happened within those walls. But let's jump ahead a few centuries to 1561. That's when things really changed for Madrid.
Right, that's when King Philip II moved the royal court there from Valladolid. He basically made Madrid the capital of Spain, even if it wasn't official.
Exactly. And that decision really set the stage for Madrid to become the city it is today. The court did move back to Valladolid for a bit, from 1601 to 1606, but Philip II's move really had a lasting impact. You can still see the legacy of the Habsburgs, his dynasty, in what's called El Madrid de los Austrias.
Right, that's the area with the Puerta del Sol, Plaza Mayor, all those iconic landmarks. It's like stepping back in time.
Exactly. And then you have the Bourbons who come in, another powerful dynasty, and they put their own mark on the city. One of the most important Bourbon rulers was King Charles III. People called him the best mayor of Madrid.
Wasn't he big on modernizing things?
He was. He really focused on improving infrastructure, creating beautiful public spaces. Like the royal palace we see today, that's thanks to his vision.
So you have these two big dynasties shaping the city. I wonder how their different styles and priorities influenced how Madrid developed its own identity. But the 19th century brought some new challenges, especially with the Napoleonic Wars going on in Europe.
Definitely. And for Madrid, this wasn't just something happening far away. The city was occupied by the French from 1808 to 1813. That had a huge impact on everything.
I remember reading that Napoleon's brother, Joseph Bonaparte, was made king of Spain during that time. What a crazy time that must have been.
It was. But he wasn't exactly popular. He was given the nickname Pepe Botella, which is, well, kind of like Joe Bottle.
I have to ask, where did that come from?
There are a few stories. Some say it was because he liked to drink, but it was also about some of his urban planning choices. He demolished entire neighborhoods, convents even, to make open spaces. Not a great way to win over the locals.
I can imagine. It sounds pretty extreme. But during all this, there was also a lot of resistance to the French occupation.
Oh, absolutely. One of the most important moments was the uprising on May 2nd, 1808. That day is still a holiday in Madrid.
It's amazing that something that happened in 1808 still has such an impact on the city today.
and says a lot about the spirit of the city, that desire for freedom. And you can see it captured in Goya's paintings of the uprising. The intensity, the chaos, it's all there.
Those paintings are incredible, so powerful. But even after the French were gone, Madrid still had challenges ahead.
It did. The 19th century was a turbulent time for all of Spain. The Carlist Wars, a whole series of civil wars, they really destabilized things. And then there were cholera epidemics that ripped through the city. It's remarkable that Madrid survived all of that and became the modern city we know.
It speaks to the resilience of the city. And speaking of resilience, let's move into the 20th century, a period of huge change for Madrid and the whole world.
Right, a century of progress, but also a lot of tragedy. For Madrid, it starts with the Second Republic, a time of reform, but it ultimately led to the Spanish Civil War.
A defining moment in Spanish history, and Madrid was right in the middle of it. The city was under siege for 3 years. You can still see the scars of that conflict today.
The people of Madrid endured so much during that time. And then after the Civil War comes Franco's dictatorship from 1939 to 1975. That period had a huge impact on Madrid's landscape, on its architecture, its economy, even who lived there.
It's amazing how one regime can have such a lasting effect on a city, right down to its buildings and its people.
Absolutely. You can see Franco's influence in the Nuevos Ministerios area, a big administrative complex built to show off the power of the regime. Then there's the rise of skyscrapers, a symbol of modernization, but also a departure from the traditional Madrid style.
So even with the hardships of a dictatorship, there were still efforts to change and shape the city. I wonder what life was like for everyday people under Franco's rule.
Life under Franco was complicated. The regime brought stability after the chaos of the Civil War, but it was also a time of repression. Free speech was limited, political opponents were silenced, and traditional values were really emphasized. And yet, even with all that, there were signs of resistance, little bits of cultural change happening.
It's incredible how, even in the most difficult circumstances, you see creativity and the desire for freedom finding a way to come out. I know that in the 1950s, Madrid became a center for student activism against the dictatorship.
It did. And those students, they really helped pave the way for the democratic Spain we see today.
Their courage was incredible. But before we get to that, I read that Madrid's population exploded during this time, from about 500,000 in 1900 to 3 million by 1980.
Wow.
That's huge. I imagine that put a lot of strain on the city.
It did. Madrid went through a massive transformation, not just politically and socially, but physically as well. Those growing pains really shaped the modern city we know today.
I'm starting to get a sense of just how much change Madrid went through. And even after Franco's death in 1975, there were still challenges ahead.
Definitely. The transition to democracy wasn't always smooth. In 1981, there was actually an attempted coup d'etat that could have derailed the whole thing.
It's remarkable how Madrid has gone through so much. But amidst all of that, there was this cultural awakening, wasn't there? The Movida Madrileña.
Yes, the Movida Madrileña. It was a time of incredible creativity after Franco's death, a reaction to all that repression, a celebration of freedom and individuality.
But it wasn't just about having fun, right? It was about pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo.
Exactly. Think about Almodovar's early films, the music of Mecano, a whole generation of artists and musicians expressing themselves in ways that were unthinkable just a few years before.
It's amazing how art can be such a powerful force for change, a way to process trauma and rebuild a society. You can still feel that energy in Madrid today. But as we move into the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Madrid faced some new challenges, like the 2004 train bombings. They shook the whole country.
They did. A horrific act of terrorism, 191 people killed, over 2,000 injured. It left a deep scar on the city, on the whole of Spain, really.
It must have had a huge impact on politics, too.
It did. It happened just 3 days before a general election. The response to the bombings became a major campaign issue. There were debates about security, about immigration, about Spain's involvement in the Iraq War. The impact of that day is still felt in Spanish politics today.
It's a reminder that even in a modern city like Madrid, these threats are still very real. But even after something like that, Madrid showed incredible resilience, the ability to rebuild and keep going.
Absolutely. And there were more challenges to come. The global financial crisis in 2007 hit Spain really hard.
Yeah.
The housing bubble burst, leading to economic hardship, and a lot of people feeling disillusioned with the government.
And that led to the rise of the leftist Podemos movement, right?
It did. Podemos, which means we can, tapped into that anger and frustration. People felt like the traditional parties weren't working for them. Podemos called for radical change, more equal society. It was a major shift in Spanish politics, not just in Madrid, but across the whole country.
It's interesting how economic hardship and politics are so connected, how they can give birth to these new movements that challenge the way things are. Even in a city as successful as Madrid, you see these underlying tensions, this constant struggle for power and influence.
That's true, and Madrid's history shows us that back and forth, that ebb and flow of power. From the Moors to the Habsburgs and Bourbons to dictators and Democrats, they've all left their mark on the city. And that struggle is still going on today, in the streets, in politics, in its culture.
It's clear that Madrid has a rich and complicated history, and we've only scratched the surface. But I think we should take a break here and give everyone a chance to absorb all this.
Yeah, let's take a moment to process. When we come back, we'll explore what makes Madrid such a vibrant cultural hub today.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Madrid's history, but now I want to get into the cultural side of things. What makes Madrid such a cultural hotspot?
Well, the art scene is incredible. We got to talk about the Golden Triangle of art.
I've heard the name, but I don't really know much about it beyond, what the museums are called. Remind me.
Sure. So the Golden Triangle of art is these three world-famous museums: the Prado, the Reina Sofia, and the Thyssen-Bornemisza. And they're all within walking distance of each other. You can spend a whole week exploring them.
Now that you mention it, I do remember reading about them being really close together. What makes each one special?
Well, the Prado, you have to go if you're into classical European art, especially the Spanish masters. You've got Goya, Velázquez, El Greco, even Hieronymus Bosch. Seeing Las Meninas by Velázquez in person, it's just breathtaking.
I can imagine. And what about the Reina Sofia? I know it's named after the current king's mother, but what kind of art is there?
The Reina Sofia focuses on modern and contemporary art, mostly Spanish art from the 20th century. That's where you'll find Picasso's Guernica.
Wow.
It's an incredibly powerful painting capturing the horrors of the Spanish Civil War.
Guernica is one of those paintings that's so moving, even just seeing a picture of it. To see it in person must be something else.
It really is. And then there's the Thyssen-Bornemisza. It's a private collection, but it covers centuries of European art. It's a good complement to the Prado and the Reina Sofia. Gives you a wider view of art history.
It's amazing that you can see such a huge range of art all in one city. And that whole area, the Paseo del Prado and El Retiro, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2021. That says a lot.
It does. It shows how important Madrid is as a global center for art and culture. But it's not just about those three big museums. There are tons of smaller, more specialized museums to discover too.
Okay, spill the beans. What are some of the hidden gems we should check out?
If you're into history, there's the National Archaeological Museum. They have a fascinating collection of artifacts from ancient Spain. One of the highlights is the Dama de Elche, a sculpture from way back in Iberian times.
Cool. And what if you're, let's say, less into ancient stuff?
Well, if you're interested in more recent history, there's the Museum of the Blue Division. It tells the story of this Spanish unit that fought with the Nazis on the Eastern Front during World War II.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a controversial part of Spanish history, but it's important to know about.
I had no idea that museum even existed. See? Always something new to learn. But what about something a little more, lighthearted?
If you're just looking for something fun, there's the Wax Museum. It's kind of touristy, but it can be entertaining.
Who doesn't love a good wax museum? They always creep me out a little, but they're so cool.
And then there's the Bullfighting Museum in Las Ventas. It's right inside the bull ring. If you want to understand bullfighting in Spain, it's a must-see.
I know bullfighting is a sensitive topic, but it's a big part of Spanish culture.
It is. And it's important to learn about these things from different perspectives.
Okay, so we've talked about museums, but Madrid is also famous for its squares, right? Each one with its own vibe. Which ones should visitors definitely see?
The Plaza Mayor is a classic. It's this big rectangular square surrounded by beautiful buildings, and there's always something going on there.
We've seen pictures. It's gorgeous, especially lit up at night. What's the history there?
It used to be a marketplace. They've had everything there, from bullfights to executions.
Wow.
Nowadays, it's a popular spot for concerts and festivals, or just hanging out with friends.
It sounds like a great place to people watch and get a feel for the city.
Then there's the Puerta del Sol. That's considered the heart of Madrid. That's where you'll find the Kilómetro Cero, the point where all distances in Spain are measured from.
It's amazing how much history has happened in that one spot.
Right. From royal parades to protests, it's all happened there.
What about some of the other squares? What makes them unique?
Well, you have the Plaza de Cibeles, which is where the Cibeles fountain is. It's one of Madrid's most famous landmarks. It's a very grand square with impressive buildings like the Palacio de Comunicaciones, which is now City Hall, and the Bank of Spain.
So lots of architectural beauty to admire there.
Definitely. And then for something totally different, you have the Plaza de Lavapiés. It's a lot more bohemian, more multicultural. It's a neighborhood with a long history of immigration. It's known for its street life, its food, and its nightlife.
Sounds like there's a square for everyone in Madrid. But I know you're a bit of a bookworm, so tell me about the Barrio de las Letras, the literary quarter.
Ah, the Barrio de las Letras. If you love literature, this is the place for you. It's where all these literary giants lived and worked back in Spain's golden age. Cervantes, Lope de Vega, Quevedo, Góngora, they were all there.
It must feel like walking through a history book.
It does. Calle Huertas, the main street, is lined with plaques for all the writers who live there.
And the area around the Plaza de Santa Ana is known for its nightlife. It's cool how this historical neighborhood is also a modern entertainment hub.
Madrid's good at mixing the old and the new.
Oh,
And speaking of mixing, we can't forget about sports. It's huge in Madrid.
of course. We got to mention Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid, two of the most famous football clubs in the world.
More than just clubs, they're institutions. They each have these die-hard fans and this incredible history. Going to a match at the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium, Real Madrid's home, is an experience.
For sure. But there's more to Madrid's sports scene than just football, right?
Oh yeah, there's the San Silvestre Vallecana, a 10K race on New Year's Eve. It's one of the biggest races in the world.
I've heard of that.
It's a fun way to end the year and see the city.
And what about other sports? I know Spain is big on tennis and cycling.
They are. The Mutua Madrid Open is a big tennis tournament played on clay. It brings in the top players every year. And Madrid's a great starting point for exploring the mountains around the city. They've got some amazing routes for cyclists.
Wow, didn't know that. Definitely adding it to my list. And for those of us who like things a little more temperature controlled.
Well, there's always Madrid Snow Zone. It's the biggest indoor ski slope in all of Europe.
Really?
Yeah. It's a fun way to spend a day, no matter the weather.
That sounds awesome. It's incredible how many different sports Madrid has, from the traditional stuff like football and bullfighting to things like indoor skiing.
It shows how dynamic the city is, how it embraces new things and caters to everyone. And Madrid's hosted some major international sporting events too, like the 1982 World Cup and the Davis Cup finals.
Sports are clearly a big part of life there. But there's another side to Madrid we should touch on.
You're right, we can't forget about its economic power. Madrid's a major player, not just in Spain, but globally.
Oh yeah, we're not just talking museums and culture here. Madrid's got serious economic muscle. It has the fourth largest economy in Europe.
It's a hub for finance, industry, you name it. Remember all those industries we talked about earlier, aerospace, automotive, textiles? Well, they all contribute to Madrid's economy. But the service sector is the biggest part, over 78% of the region's GDP.
And all those banks and insurance companies headquartered there, they're major players on the global stage. It's crazy how a city can go from being a royal court to this economic powerhouse.
It shows how adaptable Madrid is, how good it is at attracting talent and investment. But none of that would be possible without great infrastructure.
I gotta say, I'm obsessed with the Madrid Metro. It's one of the biggest subway systems in the world, and it runs so smoothly. That's urban planning done right.
It is. And it makes getting around so easy. And don't forget about the high-speed rail lines that connect Madrid to other cities in Spain and even further. Barcelona, Seville, Lisbon, even Toledo. It's made Spain so much more accessible.
Technology can really change things. And then there's the Adolfo Suarez Madrid Barajas Airport. That's a huge international hub.
One of the busiest airports in Europe. It handles millions of passengers every year. And it's super important for flights to Latin America, connecting Madrid to the Spanish-speaking world. One of its runways is the longest in Europe. Did you know that?
I did not. It's incredible, the scale of these infrastructure projects. Yeah. But I remember reading about one that didn't go so well, the Ciudad Real Central Airport.
Ah, yes, the ghost airport.
What happened there?
It was built with private money. The idea was to take some of the pressure off Madrid Barajas, but it was a total flop.
Why?
Seems like they overestimated the demand. It closed down just a few years after opening. Now there's this huge empty airport just sitting there. It's a good reminder to be careful with these big projects.
Definitely a cautionary tale. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about education. Madrid isn't just about business and transportation, it's also a big center for learning and research.
For sure. With 6 public universities, plus private ones and other institutions, Madrid attracts students and scholars from all over.
And there are so many different areas of study. You have the Complutense University, which goes all the way back to the 16th century. It offers more traditional programs. And then you have places like the Rey Juan Carlos University, which focuses on more modern fields like business and engineering.
And we can't forget about UNED, Spain's National Distance Learning University.
Yeah.
Its headquarters are in Madrid. It's been a leader in making education accessible to people who can't go to a traditional university.
It's great that Madrid has so many options for education. But learning in Madrid goes beyond just universities. The city is full of places that enrich people's lives, both residents and visitors.
That's true. Museums, theaters, concert halls, libraries, even a planetarium. Madrid's got it all.
It sounds like you could spend your whole life exploring Madrid and still not see everything.
You probably could. But I think we've covered a lot today. From Madrid's beginnings as a Moorish settlement to its rise as a global power, we've touched on its struggles, its triumphs, and its resilience.
I feel like I've learned so much about Madrid already, and I'm realizing there's so much more to explore. What would you say are some of the big takeaways from our deep dive so far?
Well, I think one thing that stands out is that Madrid is a city of contrasts. It's steeped in history and tradition, but it's also constantly changing, embracing new things. It's old and new, grand and intimate, bustling and peaceful all at the same time.
And it's been through so much, good and bad, but it always manages to come out stronger.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. It challenges your expectations and surprises you with its complexity and its beauty.
I like that. Well, I'm ready to keep going and dive even deeper into this amazing city. We've gone through so much of Madrid's history, from its Moorish roots to its modern economy. And then there's that incredible cultural scene. It's a city that really has it all.
It has, hasn't it? We've uncovered so many layers of Madrid. What gets me is how it's always pushing the boundaries of what a city can be.
Yeah, that mix of history and modernity is amazing. The way Madrid blends its ancient heritage with all that cutting-edge architecture and contemporary art.
It's like a tapestry, woven from all these different threads, different eras and influences.
And at the heart of it all, you have the people of Madrid bringing the city to life with their energy and passion.
Absolutely. That energy comes through in everything, from their festivals and traditions to their hospitality, that love for enjoying life.
That nickname for Joseph Bonaparte, Pepe Botella, I keep thinking about that. It's like this perfect mix of defiance and humor, something you see throughout Madrid's history.
It's a great example.
Yeah.
Even when things are tough, the people of Madrid hold on to their identity, that zest for life.
And speaking of tough times, we can't forget about the darker parts of Madrid's past. The 2004 train bombings, they were a reminder that even in a modern city like this, tragedy can happen.
It's important to remember those moments. Not to dwell on the sadness, but to learn from them, to see the strength of the human spirit.
The way Madrid came together after the bombings, that solidarity, the determination to rebuild, it's really inspiring.
It shows you the character of the city and its people. And that resilience, it's everywhere in Madrid's history. Recovering from wars, political turmoil, economic crises, Madrid always seems to come back stronger.
It's like the city has this heartbeat, a pulse that keeps it moving forward no matter what.
That's a great way to put it. And I think that's what draws people to Madrid. It's always evolving, but it stays true to itself, embraces its past, but looks to the future with this sense of optimism and possibility.
Well, after all this, I'm ready to book a flight to Madrid. I want to see all this firsthand, walk through the Prado, try some tapas in a busy plaza.
Me too. Honestly, what I'm most looking forward to is just getting lost in the city, taking it all in, discovering those little hidden gems we haven't even mentioned.
That's the beauty of a city like Madrid. There's always something new, something that'll surprise you. It makes you want to explore every corner.
And as you explore, think about what really speaks to you about Madrid. What parts of its history, its culture, its people intrigue you? What questions do you have that you want to dig deeper into?
We've only scratched the surface, but hopefully we've piqued your curiosity, given you a taste of what this incredible city is all about.
So to everyone listening, as you continue to learn about Madrid through books, movies, or even better, a trip there, remember to keep an open mind and a sense of adventure. Let Madrid surprise you.
Until next time, happy exploring.
Farewell.